I want to welcome everyone to our forum tonight. My name is Mindy Goebel. I'm the President and CEO of the Richmond Chamber of Commerce, and we'll have two sections here. We'll do our mayoral candidates first, and once they're finished, they'll come down and the commissioners will come up. I'll take just a moment here to introduce Cecile Schubert. She is our timekeeper tonight, and Bill Bryant, as all of you know from WKYT, is our moderator, and we're very pleased to have both of them to help us tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and Bill will give further instructions as we go.
As best I can. Well, so, let me say welcome, and it's so good to have a good crowd here tonight, and we'll have a fair and honest debate in the Richmond mayor's race, and then later we'll hear, we'll call it a forum, and then later we'll hear from the candidates for city commission. There'll be a lot of changes this year. Obviously, there'll be a new mayor. There'll be largely a new city commission, and it'll be very interesting to see how we go forward here in Richmond. It's been my pleasure to be a resident of this community for a long time. I came basically to EKU and didn't leave, so most of my adult life has been here, and that's the story of so many who've come here, and then many of you, of course, have grown up here as well. So we'll have a good debate. We'll talk about the future of this fine city, and let's get going. We will introduce to you the candidates for mayor of the city of Richmond, and they are longtime Commissioner Robert Blythe and also elected and re-elected Commissioner Jim Newby. And it's good to have both of you here. We appreciate it very much. We'll go back and forth through the evening with our questions, and I'll try to keep order with who went first or second, but we'll just have a good conversation here tonight. Let's begin with a 1-minute opening statement from the candidates for mayor, and then we'll follow that with answers that we'll give them, each candidate about a minute to answer, and then we'll have a closing statement at the end of our mayoral forum tonight. We didn't toss a coin. Who wants to go first here? All right, we'll go with the opening statement from Jim Newby.
Well, my opening statement is going to be a little history of myself. I get asked a lot of questions about, what's my history, where I've been, and you get a lot of things sometimes. You hear about yourself, really that was me. So anyway, I was born and raised in Madison County.
The microphone's not on.
It's not on?
Can't hear you back here.
Put it really close to your mouth.
Now?
No. Nope.
You got a microphone first on here?
Get back here.
I think this one's on.
Now, is it on now? Now? All right. How about now? All right. Well, I'm just going to open up a little history about myself. I was born and raised in Madison County, a little area called Poozy Ridge. I'm a graduate of Madison Central High School and of EKU. Immediately after college, I had a chance to work abroad, and my work took me to 27 countries on 4 different continents. So, I got introduced to a lot of different people, cultures, and governments. After that, I came back home, and I was like, well, what can I do in the community? I love working with people, and I'm not quite ready to sit down yet. So I became a fireman here in the city of Richmond, and I did that for 10 years. And local politics has always been an interest of mine. And so I said, well, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, and lo and behold, 3 terms later, here I am. Stop.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
You can get back to your history and your answer as we go. Let's now introduce candidate for mayor, Robert Blythe.
Thanks, Bill. Good evening. I'm Robert R. Blythe, candidate for mayor of the city of Richmond. Let me first thank the chamber for this opportunity to make this presentation to you, and then let me thank each of you for coming this evening to hear. I'm a lifelong resident of Richmond, a voter and a property-owning taxpayer. I'm a minister, a retired school teacher, and I've served as a member of several local boards and commissions over the past 40 years or so, and service groups. I've served as a member of the Richmond Board of Commissioners for 8 terms. That's 16 years, come December of this year, since 2003. And I'm proud of Richmond, but would like the opportunity to make Richmond even better. I ask for your vote and your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And the questions come from our audience. As these questions have been dropped in up there, these are not my questions, although I might press for a little harder on an answer if we don't hear it. But let's begin with the first question. It will be answered by each of our candidates. And we'll address this first to candidate Blythe. If you're elected mayor, what do you see as the most pressing issue for the city, and what is your plan to fix it?
Thanks, Bill. Most pressing issue. I actually see a couple of things which qualify as pressing, and one of those I'll stress perhaps again, but the cleanliness of our city. I asked some of our business leaders, what do you see as the number one issue for our community? Business leaders said the cleanliness of our city, because that then contributes to the attractiveness of our city, and when businesses are looking to come, they will look at such things as that. I also see the safety of our community as a pressing issue. Now, there are other things in front of us that are on the desk, for example, downtown and so on, but those two are my primary two pressing issues because of the impact they have on everything else.
Candidate Newby, most pressing issue for the city and your plan to fix it?
Well, I think the most pressing issue at this current moment is, the possible development of a $6 million project, around on Main Street, off Main Street, First Street, and around City Hall. I think I'm avidly against that. I think that, this has been the most frugal administration, and now with three months left in it, we're proposing $6 million, to go into something like that. I think it's in the wrong place, the wrong time. I don't see doing that, which would also cause parking issues. And it's a side street project. And I think that we can spend much more money on things like, we need a senior citizen center and for our children and the parks.
So the next question is very logical, and we'll continue with candidate Newby. What is your solution to downtown parking?
Well, at the current time, I don't think downtown parking is that bad. We have issues. We don't need a parking structure. I'm avidly against taking away turning lanes because we still have a major highway, 25, running through downtown Richmond. And if the folks think that taking away a parking lane, if the railroad tracks, if they think that's bad now, it's going to be a lot worse. I think possibly making City Hall, parking for the public.
Candidate Blythe, your solution to downtown parking?
First of all, Bill, I wish folks could understand that perhaps we don't have what we're calling a parking problem. We've talked about this in the commission, that we have parking issues. I've already proposed something to address initially the low-hanging fruit approach to our parking situation. And that is to let folks know, first of all, where the parking exists in downtown Richmond. It's impossible for 10 cars to park in one parking space in front of a store that they want to visit. But there are other parking spaces in downtown Richmond, perhaps 1 block away from Main Street, and there's several parking spaces available. So first of all, we need to let folks know where there is parking, and then from there, we can approach, even as Commissioner Newby has said, with the city's own parking lot. We can adjust who parks in that during business hours during the day.
Candidate Blythe, do you feel there is enough interaction between the city and EKU? And if not, how would you change it?
Enough interaction? Probably not. There are things that we do together. The city offers positions, for example, internship, co-op type positions for certain departments, such as the fire department. But there are other ways even. I've thought perhaps there ought to be some kind of internship or cooperative position in the mayor's office, somewhere in City Hall, that those students, for example, at EKU, who are looking at positions in government or just politics in general, they could come into City Hall of Richmond, municipal government, and get some firsthand experience. There are other ways, of course, in cooperation with our parks, et cetera, that the city can cooperate with the university and vice versa.
Candidate Newby, interaction between the city and EKU.
Well, our current and new city manager is working with EKU and applying for some grants to maybe benefit EKU and the city of Richmond. I get asked that question a lot, what happened to the relationship between the students and downtown Richmond? Well, what killed it is when the bars closed, and I get a lot of alcohol. Well, it's not so much just alcohol, it's a place for kids to mingle, to socialize. You ask any college kid, 18, 19 years old, and you're trying to recruit them to come to school here, one of the first 3 questions they're going to ask you is, hey, what's it to do on the weekends in that town? So now they, I guess, socialize in our neighborhoods.
Candidate newbie, we'll start this one. This interesting question. It says, notoriously, you two have opposite opinions in voting at commission meetings. What do you uniquely bring to the mayor's position?
Well, that's a good question. That's part of my closing statements. Well, uniquely, I always say what I'm going to say. I do what I'm going to do. I've never ridden the fence on any issue, and I've never voted a certain way just to appease the situation.
Candidate Blythe.
Bill, first, I would take issue with whether or not Commissioner Newby and I have notoriously been...
You're giving up somebody else.
Obviously, but there are times, there are different factors that prompt how we vote. And oftentimes, if there are things that I bring uniquely, for example, my perspective, I tell folks anytime that Commissioner Newby and I are 2 different people. So I bring my perspective, which is one of 16 years on the commission, having served across this city in almost every possible way in serving folks. And I think sometimes when I come to a vote, there are aspects that I'm aware of, perhaps, and sometimes I share those with the whole commission, but there are aspects that I may be aware of that would prompt me to vote in a way that is not intended to be opposite Commissioner Newby's, but just happens to be.
Candidate Blythe, and this is a specific question, do we need to have an economic development director? Do we need to have a Main Street coordinator?
Very interesting. Yes, let me, first of all, that economic development director. Over the years, the commission has discussed the possibility of having, for example, an assistant city manager. We've explored that several years. And one of the things that crossed my mind in the past many months is that perhaps we could pursue an assistant city manager's position, but make that person also half-time or more an economic development director. I doubt that either of those positions would be full-time initially, so we could share the skills of that person. Yes, I do believe we need an economic development director, not just focusing on downtown, and that is a concern.
Main Street coordinator?
Main Street, but focusing across the whole city. Now, a Main Street coordinator has been effective in past couple of years. It would be worth considering again. I was a little concerned when we did dismiss that position.
Candidate Newby.
Well, I agree with Robert, on the fact that the assistant city manager, we have all been in talks about that, and I think that's an excellent idea in the future. Downtown coordinator, yes, I think we need one. I think Miss Rex did an excellent job. She's very passionate about what she was doing, and I would be all for that once again. Perhaps if Rose wanted to come back with us.
Candidate Newby, what would you do to retain city employees?
What I would do is, a lot of our city employees, they don't make a lot of money, and several years ago, they got an incentive pay at the end of the year, which was just a couple of $100s. It came at Christmas time. A lot of them, depending on that for Christmas, the end of the year taxes, and they would like to have that back again. And that's something that they're not asking us to give them. That was taken from them. And I think that the morale is very low across the city with the employees. I'm the commissioner that's out. I talk to every department weekly, and I think that's something, just a little something, would make them feel much more appreciated.
Candidate Blythe, retention of city employees.
First of all, we do try every year in the budget to give employees what is an appropriately significant raise when that's possible. But it isn't all about money. It's about doing the kinds of things among employees that create an atmosphere in which people really enjoy their jobs, whatever their jobs might be. And that isn't always about money. It would be good for us to provide, for example, and there have been a couple of things in the past 2 years, some opportunities for employees, for example, to participate in community-type projects. I talked with someone a couple of days ago about community gardens that are available at a shelter out on Pine Street. What's needed is somebody to maintain those gardens each year. It would be wonderful to use city employees as an incentive, if they would work in that, to give them such things as time off or some other kind of a consideration. But I think creating the kind of atmosphere in which people will enjoy their jobs would help with our employees.
Candidate Blythe, and this question again worded from the audience, whose responsibility is it to address the drug epidemic? Is it their problem or our problem? This is the way the question is put.
Okay, so they didn't qualify to use the word "their."
Right.
Oh, that's all right then. The problem.
I would take it, is it a local government issue, you know?
Is it a local government
Would
issue?
we-
I'll address it in that way then, Bill,
Yeah.
not knowing surely specifically what they're asking. It sadly is everybody's problem now. It would be wonderful if the humans' hearts would keep them from certain things. Well, they don't. People get involved in things, sometimes unintentionally. But because there are those who do have drug use problems, that means that, for example, it involves our hospitals and doctors' offices, it involves our police department, it involves all of our first responders, whether the fire department or paramedics. Everybody now is involved. It's impossible to separate. We must look at, however, the possibility of prevention. I still say it's possible to tell folks, or tell children at least, you say no, or law enforcement, or also treatment. But we need to look at all three of those areas in order to come up with any kind of working solution.
Candidate Newby, whose responsibility is it to address the drug epidemic?
Well, the drug epidemic problem, it's a nationwide problem, and it's here to stay. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to win it. We have to combat it. It's part of life now. And I think that it's not really a city. The city plays a role, but the role starts at home. It starts at home with children, kindergarten up. I think everyone in here, all citizens play a role, from your children to the schools, to rehabilitation, to law enforcement, to, confinement. We all have to come together on that. It's not going to go away, and I don't think it's not a city per se issue, but the city can play a role in all of these areas.
Candidate Newby, this questioner says Richmond seems to have a large number of streets with patched sections and uneven surfaces. Some have not been resurfaced for years. Why is this such a problem, and how can it be resolved?
Well, now we have a list, and we've started with this year mainly of prioritizing streets. Citizens give their priorities to the commissioners, and we report it to the city manager. And that's an issue that we're going to have to address more in the future, pay more attention to in the future, and prioritize these streets and just keep it under control.
Candidate Blythe, streets.
Our streets are being paved right now, I'm sure as many folks have noticed, particularly on such as Big L Avenue. Although Scott and some of the folks, I think, came out and cut it up today. But
There's a hole out there right now.
There's a hole out there right now. But they're being paved now. Commissioner Newby's right in that we ask folks through the year to identify, or to help us to identify the streets that really need that paving. And yes, I identified some, and they're being paved this time, that had not been paved in a while. They were considerably used, but also. Now, there's one other aspect of that, the money that we get to pave the streets, and it's called MAP money. But we get a return to our community from some of the money spent as taxes on fuel. One other thing is, I asked her a couple of years ago myself that with the money we had in our rainy day fund, because we had many streets that needed attention, that we would actually remove some money from the rainy day fund, rainy day, and use it for repairing some of the streets that had not been repaired in quite some time.
Candidate Blythe, a question about senior citizens. This questioner says Richmond senior citizens population is 46%, and they point out that Berea, Versailles, and Stanford all have up-to-date and vibrant senior citizen centers. What can Richmond do to have an adequate facility that will provide space and activities for this population?
The work we do with senior citizens begins not just with a building, but with programming. I've already spoken with our Senior Citizen Center director about maintaining some additional programs beyond, but of course we're limited by the facility itself. Some years ago, when I was attending a Kentucky League of Cities meeting, there was an agency that said we would like to give Richmond some money to build a new center. Right now, Richmond has, according to her, some projects, other projects on the table. But we need to look at probably not just a senior program, but what I call an intergenerational program, a facility that can handle not only senior adult programs, senior citizen programs, but also millennial programs and teen programs and children programs perhaps, but try an intergenerational approach to meet the needs of all of the generations of our community.
Candid newbie, senior citizens in Richmond.
Well, we need a new senior citizen center. I mean, the one we've got is, it's not good. We need to invest some of that money that we're proposing for other projects into our senior citizens and the center. I mean, we're all going to be there one day.
Candid newbie, public information, technology, and social media play a major role in today's society, this questioner says. Do you believe Richmond city government is doing an adequate job of informing citizens about issues and projects and day-to-day activities?
I do, but I think we're getting better. We need to be better, but that's one of the directions we're heading in, with technology and working with tourism, all in the chamber, and all these different other organizations that can help and provide the information given. But yeah, we're heading in the right direction.
Candid Blythe?
I agree that we're doing a pretty good job of informing citizens, but that's a two-sided street there. Not only does the information need to be put so citizens can get it, but then citizens need to make the effort to retrieve that information. I'm not sure that there's a lot going on there until there's some issue that has severely upset someone, that folks will seek the information. But the city attempts to put the information out, and I appreciate the local media and their assistance to the city of putting the information out there. Folks have to read the paper, they have to listen to the radio, they have to look at the city's website and those kinds of things, but the information is somewhere that is accessible.
Candid Blythe, a question on Parks and Recreation. Once marketed as a place to work and grow and play, Richmond, in the opinion of this question, seems to now lag behind other central Kentucky cities with an attractive and vibrant parks system. What efforts could you suggest to update our parks and create more visitors for the community in that way?
I think we have a wonderful park system. We may be, as that person says, lagging behind. I'm not sure exactly what criteria are used to make that determination, but I think we have a wonderful park system. Can it be better? It certainly can, but I think lots of things can be better. One of the things that we could ask for, that I always appreciate, is citizen input. If citizens feel that there are things we could do and should be doing in our park system, I would entertain, certainly, some suggestions. Parks Board meets. I'm sure they would entertain suggestions, and that's what needs to happen. We need to hear from citizens if they believe there's something else that needs to be done in our park system.
Candid newbie, Parks.
I think our park system is fine, but it could be better. I attend the monthly park board meetings, and I think, we can work within, and we have been, and that communication is getting better. Dr. John McChesney, he's the chairman of the park board, and he's also, I guess, the chairman of the Parks and Rec Department at EKU. I have a great relationship with him. I've known him for 30 years. He was the best man at my wedding. I wish I'd have listened to him that morning, but that's a different story. But he's got great vision, and I think we all could work together.
This dovetails on that question. It's very specific, and I don't know if you even have the background for the answer to this, but why doesn't Richmond have a sports complex like Elizabethtown, is the question that this person wanted to know. So,
well, Richmond needs an indoor sports facility badly. We're lacking that. That's one of the things that I get, questions I get from parents about, we're lacking any kind from soccer to batting cages to everything. We need to invest in, that's part of what I was mentioning earlier about our children and our future in the parks. An indoor facility, it would definitely be on the list.
Candy Blythe, sports complex.
That's another time when it isn't a matter of just building a building for the sake of having the building. There needs to be a program put forth, a program of use, a program that pays for it. These things cost money, but that's the kind of project I believe that if we had some programs, if we suggested, again, from the community, if we could talk about what we would do with the complex, we can go over and look at Elizabethtown, see what they do, see how they paid for it, see what the community interest was, and maybe consider that here.
Candy Blythe, is the franchise with advanced disposal good for the city? This that says higher fees or any help for those on fixed income. So just a question apparently of concern about solid waste disposal.
It would be interesting to know if the person who wrote that question had compared what we pay with what, for example, other companies bid when we put the project out to bid. One of the things that has kind of helped us to make a decision over the past few years to use advanced is that when compared with some other companies, apples for apples, then we may find we might come up paying a bit more. But it's always our intent, the current commission, to keep monitoring what citizens are having to pay, what changes are being made in the contract offerings, and we've done at this point what we feel is best. We've tried midstream, so to speak, to modify some of the offerings of advanced, in that if there are certain kinds of pickups, you may have recalled over the past few months, pickup of certain items, we try to monitor that so that it meets the needs of the citizens, but we still have not reached a perfect point yet.
Candid Newby.
I think the next administration should look into a lot of aspects in their relationships with the city and advanced disposal.
Candid Newby, this questioner says several progressive, productive cities have enacted fairness ordinances. What is your position on a city fairness ordinance in Richmond, and why do you take that position?
I'll be for a fairness ordinance in Richmond. I mean, like that's one of the issues that we have nationwide everywhere. I would be open for that. I don't see any problem with that. I never really saw any problem, would there be any other issue with it? I never really understood why there would be an issue with that anywhere, so I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Candid Blythe.
A couple of things. One, and we have had the discussion maybe in the past 4 years or so, but my position remains that I want to monitor what other communities are experiencing who have passed what's called fairness ordinances. Really, it's a matter of adding classes to an existing human rights or human relations ordinance. So I'm trying to see what is happening in other communities, how effective the ordinance has been, and also to listen locally to see if there are folks who would complain if we had an ordinance. And then you have to kind of dig to find that kind of information. The other thing, though, I would want whatever is done in the city of Richmond to reflect that Richmond respects all people, all of our citizens, and all of those who come our way.
Candid Blythe, small businesses, this question says, are the heart and the backbone of cities. Not only do they provide revenue, but support local and civic organizations and school groups. What do you propose as mayor to encourage existing business and create new businesses in the city?
Talking with some businesses in the past several weeks, I found that one of the concerns is and we call them the hoops that folks have to jump through. We may want to re-examine the process in the city of Richmond by which businesses can be opened. I think that would serve both local folks who want to go into business and those who would consider coming from other communities into Richmond to begin local businesses, small businesses. But I think we need to look at the process. And then again, back to what I said first, we need to make sure our community has the atmosphere, that it's clean and safe. in the perception of anyone who would consider such. No one wants a business, for example, where, this is not by any chance being denigrating, but where homeless people would have to live in their front doors on Main Street, sleeping in little openings and whatever. We've got to make sure we've got an atmosphere here that is conducive to business.
Candidate Newberry. Newby.
I'm going to go along with his hoops. I think Richmond needs to be more business friendly. You know, for any new business of any size, actually. You know, and things like the Chamber of Commerce could play a role in that. Tourism could play a role in that. Advertise and just make them more welcome. And yes, and drop some of these hoops.
Let me bump this question up because it came up sort of in that question, and this is to candidate Newby first, and it's about the homeless and at-risk population. Richmond has experienced a rapid increase in homelessness. What ideas do you propose to address those issues?
Well, that's another one of those issues, with drugs and things that are a nationwide issue. I think shelters. I think we need a shelter. The Salvation Army. I think they have their rules and regulations to where they have to be out by the morning or something. And I think we need to maybe from these shelters that we have, inform them and help them get started. Guide them toward because a lot of them do have drug issues. So I think all that plays a role in there too, to get them guided, for employment.
Candidate Blythe?
Yes, that's an area that is very passionate for me because I actually chair a local task force that provides shelter for homeless families. We only, at this point, deal with families. And they can stay with us up to 6 months. That helps with families. Now, I think the question is secondary as to how folks became homeless, because all you've got to do is get out on Main Street or Irvin Street or most of the streets in downtown Richmond, and you'll see so many homeless folks just walking aimlessly, it seems. One of the things we must do, I believe even at city government level at this point, is have someone designated to coordinate all of the city's efforts. There are agencies, there's our shelter, but someone to coordinate all of the efforts that are put forth to alleviate homelessness in our community. Somebody's got to know what the left hand and right hand are doing in order to move properly in that area. It's one that affects us considerably adversely.
All right. Candidate Blythe, and I'm not sure, I think the legislation prohibits this, but how do you feel about a restaurant tax, a city restaurant tax?
Just came from the Kentucky League of Cities meeting where last week that was a major legislative matter to be considered by the league. To be able to do it might be good for the city. They'll let me go back. Someone just asked a question about a sports complex. That's conceivably a way to approach the funding. But I only want to consider such things as restaurant taxes and others when we have a purpose designated, a reason why we would ask folks to pay that. There's a consideration.
Candidate Newby.
Well, everyone knows that I've been against taxes for a long time, and I think, and I would be against this tax as well, and I think that would fall under the, under the being friendly to opening businesses and existing businesses. I think that would, put another loop there.
Candidate Newby, how do you plan to, if you're elected, to work with new city commissioners?
I think, this is part of my closing statements, but it's okay. I think the mayor, in addition to being a fifth commissioner and, presiding over the meetings, I think he also needs to be the glue to the commission. He needs to keep the commission informed. He needs to keep them updated. He needs to keep transparency within the commission as well as within the community. He needs to call the commissioners.
Candidate Blythe.
The commission ordinarily comes together to do business, which is appropriate. I remember several years ago when the incoming commission spent some time together just looking at things, looking at the city, all of our departments, our personnel, meeting folks, talking about approaches to some of the matters that are before or will come before the commission. And I think they need to do perhaps a little more team building, just to be able to work better together. There are agencies, of course, that can provide that kind of service and assistance for the commission.
Candidate Blythe, how much responsibility does a landlord have, or should they have, for criminal activity or degradation of property by the renters?
I think there are two questions in there. I think that goes off two directions. One, that degradation of property. I mean, certainly landlords should have legal recourse for someone who does something that either tears up their property or, I'm not sure what they mean by degradation.
I would take this to mean impact
Please.
on neighborhoods.
All right. Now, thank you. I would, and I've even perhaps at times approached our city attorney and our city police chief on what can we do if there are folks in a community, a neighborhood whose activity is questionable and suspicious. And because of that, there are neighbors who are afraid to live where they live, afraid to come out of their homes, afraid to walk up and down their streets. I think at this point, when it can be proven that a landlord is aware of what is taking place, that they become a party in that matter and be pursued legally.
Candidate Newby.
Well, if I understand your question right, there would be, I guess, two versions of what or yes and no, what the landlord per se would be responsible for. If it's criminal activity that's going on, drugs or violence or stuff like that, no, he wouldn't. But if it's something that's being violated, with the parking and possibly noise issues like that, yeah, I think he would be inclined to be responsible for that.
Candidate Newby, Richmond has several citizen boards that are appointed by the mayor and then approved by the commission. Do you see yourself as a supporter of these boards, is the way the question is put, such as planning and zoning, board of adjustment, or would you be one who pressures those to do things your way?
I've been fighting that for 6 years. No, I think our boards, especially, an example, the utility board. I'm not against a member of the commission or the mayor being on the board. For example, if something went down negative or if something was raised, somebody needs to be informed because, the general public, they're not calling Joe Q on the board. They're going to call the commission or the mayor. But as far as the mayor running the show, pulling the strings, no, that's what we put these people in there for, these positions.
Candidate Blythe.
Sounds like a leading question, Bill. I believe that it is the mayor's place to support those who are appointed. First of all, if the mayor has confidence when he or she, in some cases, makes that appointment, and the commission has confidence in that appointee, then they should be allowed to do what they've been appointed to do. Therefore, I believe that it is the role of the mayor and the commission even to support those who've been put in positions and not to pressure them to go one way or another. Sharing information is a good thing, but to apply pressure for one to use that information for some end that is less than honorable, no.
Candidate Blythe, a few years ago, Richmond was identified as one of Kentucky's fastest growing cities in terms of business and economic growth and in population. What ideas do you have to return the city to that status? And I guess I might just add on to that, is that a priority of yours to see growth?
It certainly is a priority, and let's go back to something I said a little earlier about, for example, an economic development director. I think, that person could play a significant role in seeking, in maintaining and monitoring economic development for our community. Also, we see building constantly of residences, whether single family or multifamily in our community, which means that somebody evidently is coming our way. But I think we need, again, I'm back to that initial issue. We need to make sure we're clean and safe so that people will want to come here and Richmond will continue to grow. And growth for the sake of growth is not necessarily good. We want to be sure that our growth is monitored and even planned.
Candidate Newby.
Well, I'll give you an example about, I guess, industry. I'd say within the next 10 years, we're going to be losing between $500,000 and $750,000 worth of occupational tax, from employees when the depot closes. And I think we need to attract industry that would provide for those job skills that are going to be lost. I think with our industrial park, we are best located to attract business, as far as any other second-class city in the state. And I think 80% of new industry, stems from industry that's already been there. So, yes.
Candidate Newby, how should the city of Richmond address the current pension crisis?
That's a good question because we're kind of unsure about what's going to go in what direction. Well, right now we have money set aside, for an explosion or to what happens firsthand. That's why I don't foresee any of these projects going on, because since I've been on the commission for the past 6 years, all I've heard is 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we have a pension crisis on the horizon. So that's why I don't foresee spending millions of dollars on side projects at this point in time.
Candidate Blythe.
I believe that the major thrust of that whole pension discussion comes, of course, out of Frankfurt, and locally in order to accommodate it, whatever Frankfurt mandates or dictates to us, we, as Commissioner Newby has said, will need to, in our budget, accommodate whatever will be the additional costs for the pension. We'll need to be ready to make adjustments. And hopefully that will never mean that we will not be able to maintain the level of employees that we have.
Candidate Blythe, do you think the budgeting technique used by the city over the past several years is adequate, and why?
Yes, I believe that the budgeting process is adequate when followed according to statute, that the city manager has the responsibility for producing a budget to present to the commission for its approval, and then actually implementing that budget through the next fiscal year. So do I believe the process is adequate? Yes, I do.
Candidate Newby, budgeting.
I do believe the process is adequate, but also it's the citizens and the employees that have made, our budget easily handled with all the money that's been set back.
Candidate Newby, what are some ways the city and the county can work together better?
Well, that's a question I get a lot. I'm not for any kind of merger whatsoever, but I do think that that the city and the county can come together on a lot of things. Mutual agreement, maybe, because we have our courthouse, and we have a lot of county property located in the center of our city, and I think we can come together on a lot of things, festivals that would benefit both the city and the county.
Candidate Blythe, city and county working together.
Two things, Bill. One, I think our city and county can work better together. Coffee is a miracle worker. I think if we more often would just simply sit down and talk, not necessarily to legislate anything, but to get ideas from each other, to see how what each does affects the other. And then we may want to continue, certainly what we've done over the past few years in tri-government meetings. Berea, City of Richmond, and Madison County Fiscal Court would get together and talk about the issues that we have in common. I think communication is the key.
Candidate Blythe, how will you deal with, here again, questions from the audience, so this is pointed, obviously there's some angle here. How will you deal with raises for city employees when most of the pressure comes from police and fire employees, according to this questioner?
Well, we want to do what is fair and right for all of our employees. We very well know that the commitment level, for example, in certain ways on the part of our first responders, our police and fire, is a different kind of commitment of their lives. However, we want to do what is appropriate for all of our departments and all of our employees. And I don't take the fire department, police department as applying pressure. Maybe so, but I don't perceive it as pressure. If they want to have conversations, I'm open to conversations.
Candidate Newby.
I'm going to have to go with exactly what he said on that right there.
So this one also is pointed. Candidate Newby, if elected, what do you plan on doing differently than people who have previously held the position of mayor in the position that you're seeking?
I'm how previous, wonder how they're talking about. If I'm elected mayor, I'm going to have more of an open door policy. It's not going to be so much, this is my way, this is how it is. I think transparency starts at City Hall. I think right now, with simple things like the security system at City Hall. And I've said before, we've got a security system at City Hall that the Pentagon would be proud of. And I just, more of an open door policy, more friendly, community friendly, and work together with the commission as a unit. That's not supposed to, a form of, because I said so.
Candidate Blythe.
If you'll allow me to make a little funny, I probably look a little different from any previous mayor. Secondly, I have a respect for all, and I always pray that that respect will be mutual. I respect anyone. I don't live by folks agreeing with me all the time. I simply want folks to be civil and be willing to discuss whatever is their concern and their issue. And then always I provided a listening ear. Whether I agree or not is not the issue with me, but it's listening to the people who have something to say.
It's time for our closing statements at this time, right? And we will do that right now. 1 minute closing statement. Again, we didn't toss the coin. The candidate Newby went first in the opening. Is there a preference there how we close?
I'll go first. He's probably a little bit more articulate than I am, so I'll go first. I think the role of the mayor, in our city manager form of government, other than being a fifth commissioner, presiding over the meetings, signing documents, rituals, stuff like that, he needs to be the glue of the commission. He needs to keep them informed. He needs to keep transparency within the commission as well as the community. I think my record speaks for itself as a commissioner. Like I said, I've never ridden the fence on any issue. I've never voted a certain way just to appease the situation. I can honestly say, in the 6 years that I've been there, every single decision that I've made, my head, mind, soul, conscience, they're all completely clear with everything. And I'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Blythe.
Again, I'm Robert R. Blythe, candidate for the office of mayor of the city of Richmond. I want to be a mayor for all of the people of Richmond. I have served, I do now serve, and will continue to serve all of Richmond's generations and all of its people. I operate, again, on a basis of respect for all. I will probably not have the opportunity to shake the hands and ask for the vote of all of the voters of Richmond. Therefore, I use this means to ask for your vote on November 6th and your support as the day approaches. And again, to thank you for coming to listen. I am proud of Richmond and would like the opportunity to help make it better. I need your vote. I was reminded by a friend of the words of President Harry Truman, who said, "The buck stops here." And for our form of government, that means with the mayor and the city manager. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. And let's give a hand to our candidate, the mayor of Richmond.
Thank you, Robert. So,
And I'll put in a non-paid political announcement, non-political announcement also. My comrade here is going in for some very serious surgery this week, and we're going to be in prayer for him.
I need prayers every day.
Yeah, but that's true.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you, and well done. Thank you very much. We'll set